Hello, everyone. My name is Lewis Harris. Thank you for joining me and my guest today at Record in Progress, where we talk about just social issues. But the Record in Progress podcast was started because I was surprised at the results of the 2024 election. And the feeling that I had was that I didn't do enough to affect the election in the way I wanted to see it go. And so I created this podcast really to share diverse perspectives, stories, and narratives so that we can create some mutual understanding and hopefully create a pathway towards a more unified and better society for all of us. So I'm joined by a friend in the community, somebody who I look up to as a mentor, who has, if you're a police officer in basically Washington State, you probably know his name because he's either helped to change the way we do things or he's pushed back on the way things have been done. And so I'd like to go ahead and have you introduce yourself.
Thank you, Louis, and for creating this podcast. I think it's important people hear perspectives from people that you interview. My name is Juan Perales. I'm the president of UNIDOS, an organization that started back in 1991, and I've been the president ever since. So I guess you could call me a dictator, but that's all right. We have dictators all around the world. So.
It seems to be like a rising trend, but
Exactly.
depending on the perspective. But yeah, excellent. So, Juan, the next question is, how do you identify? And I ask that not from a prescriptive point of view of like necessarily what your pronouns are, even though that's how you identify, please do. But I just want the audience to know who you are. So how do you identify, Juan?
Well, I identify myself as an activist. And that's why I started UNIDOS back in 1991. And so the focus of UNIDOS is police accountability. I work a lot with the Washington Coalition for Police Accountability and trying to pass legislation to hold police accountable for their actions. The area that I work on is the area of white supremacy, which fortunately we have that element in law enforcement and very difficult to remove, of course, but nonetheless it's there. And of course, we know that's how it started from the get with the slave patrol. So things have changed some, of course, in those days, but not enough has changed, to be honest with you. And so, but those are the areas that I focus on the most.
Excellent. Fine. And for the record, what state and city do you live in?
I live in Linwood, Washington, and I've been here 35 years, I think.
Excellent, excellent. And you already touched on what you do as an activist and as the leader of UNIDOS. The next question is what is a credential that you use most often to sell yourself on a job application? Even though I know you're probably not doing that these days, but.
No, I don't work anymore. I've been retired for 13 years now, something like that. So, but, well, being bilingual, I think is a very important asset for anybody. And when I started my job with the city, that helped me because I used to visit a lot of people's homes to energy audits for the energy conservation program. So when I ran into Latinos that didn't speak the language well, I could talk to them. So
it's excellent.
Again, I'm a hard worker, and I try always to impress people with that idea because we want people at work that are not going to come to work late and go home early.
That's right. Say that. It's a good point. All right, Juan. So let's get into the meat of the question. So the first one is, how did you vote in the 2024 presidential election?
Well, I voted Democrat. In this day and age, the other side is just too outrageous and promotes extremism and violence, and we can't have that. So the Democrats are not that much different, to be honest with you, but at least not as bad as the other side. I mean, a lot of countries have 3, 4, 5, 8 parties, but we only have 2. So we have to make the choice between those 2.
Yeah, and you sound a little discouraged when you say you voted Democrat. Can you unpack that a little?
Well, yeah, as you well know, 45% of the Latino voters went with Trump this year, and 10% more Black men went with Trump. Now, I feel that the Democratic Party basically abandoned the working class. And when you abandon the working class, well, eventually the working class is going to abandon you. And I think that's what happened this time around. People did not want more of the last 4 years, high inflation, and the wars we're in. Ukraine, and obviously what's going on in Gaza with the genocide that our tax dollars support from Mr. Biden. And that's, I think, a reason why we had something like they estimate around 14 million less voters participating in this election, which I think was due to the fact that they threw the dice and say, okay, well, let's go with Trump. He talks a lot. Sometimes we'll reverse what he says one day, the next week. So maybe there's a chance that maybe he'll do the right thing at one point in time in his administration, which I doubt. But I think that's what a lot of people did.
Right. And I want to, I mean, you make a excellent point there. I also think that there is benefit for audience members to know specifically the lens that you and your organization and your advocacy have really done the work that you've done for so long. Police accountability, and you and I know this because we worked in this space, but police accountability has always kind of historically in the social mainstream been a Black folks issue. But what people don't realize, or what people don't give much credence to, is that it also has affected Latino community, and particularly people who are immigrants or who fit that bill. And so I'm curious about that because not much people hear about that perspective, and it's important.
Well, one of the things that why we don't hear as much from the Latino community, because a lot of those people that have been killed or brutally have been undocumented people, and they don't want to raise attention to their status. So they don't complain as much as Black America does. But I mean, if you look at police, an average of 1,100 people die in the hands of police over the last 6 years. And out of those 1,100, 25% are Black Americans, when they only make up 12% of the population. But the other thing that I started back in 1991, trying to work with Chief Fitzsimons, because police were profiling Mexicans.
Mhm.
Like, oh, that guy looks like he's a Mexican and undocumented, probably. So let's stop him. They stopped him. The guy didn't have documents, or maybe not even a driver's license. So they called ICE. ICE would come and they'd take him away. And eventually we got an ordinance passed in the city of Seattle by Councilmember Nick Licata back in 2003 that prohibited collaboration between ICE and police. Only an exception would be if they knew who the guy was, he was a criminal, and in that case, nobody minds that there's collaboration between law enforcement and ICE. If they know it's a known criminal that they're out there, that they stopped.
Sure. And I'm curious, we're going to get to the next question, which is, what are three feelings you have about the results of the 2024 presidential election?
Well, first of all, like I said earlier, the Democrats abandoned the working class, which and people didn't want any more the last 4 years, high inflation and the wars that we are in. And I think that Kamala Harris to focus more on the economy, but she focused too much on identity politics. Well, what you said about Trump throughout the campaign, I mean, we already knew all that stuff pretty much. So I think that immigration, of course, was what I think helped Trump win the election as well, because even since his first administration, we had the Muslim ban and all that stuff that was going on. And so anti-immigrant attitude, and a lot of the people in this country have that attitude. What they don't understand is that Mexicans were here before the Europeans came to this country and pillaged and committed genocide of Native Americans, indigenous people, and enslaved the Blacks to make this country grow and become industrialized. So if you really want to talk about deportations and criminal elements, well, we could go back in history and start to say, hey, all these Europeans are saltwater wetbacks. They came here and raped and pillaged, and now they're helping Mr. Netanyahu do the same in Gaza. So it's a violent country, not only the most violent country, and not only externally with war, but internally as well. And that's at the hands of police.
It's I'm really glad you said that. The United States of America is one of the most violent countries in the world. And I don't think many people really think of us that. We think of the United States that way. But that's a objective reality. So I'm really glad you said that.
We've been in war probably 90% of our existence, something like 229 years out of 247 years of existence.
Right.
So we're a war machine. But yet, surprisingly, even though we're the most sophisticated militarily and most powerful army in the world, we lost the last three wars. We lost in Vietnam, we lost in Iraq, and we lost in Afghanistan. And I think that pretty soon they will pull the plug on Zelensky in Ukraine. But I don't know about Gaza, though. That'll be something that I think that was another thing that Kamala failed to do. She kept on supporting Netanyahu, and they were going to continue to send weapons. Now, Netanyahu being a white supremacist like our president, it more than likely will continue unless there's enough pressure in this country to make him stop. By the United Nations, 124 countries all voted to stop the war in Gaza, and the only one that voted against it was the United States.
I'm really thankful for you being on because your framing of some of these issues just creates a more realistic picture of what's happening. America is one of the most violent countries in the world. We've been in war about, you say, 80 or 90% of our existence. And then also that Netanyahu is a white supremacist. And when I look at the tactic of white supremacy or authoritarianism or all of that, there's textbook examples and many of the examples that you indicated. So I just want our listeners, because the point of this podcast is to bring together different perspectives, narratives, and stories so that folks can have understanding, so we can create a pathway towards a unified society. And in my opinion, a unified society is an inclusive society that is diverse and values humanity and life. And the reality is that that's kind of difficult in a country that is just innately violent. You know what I mean? Thank you for putting that perspective, giving me that perspective, because it helped.
And the problem we have, Lewis, also as well, is that white people only make like 55% of this country's population these days. So they're scared of becoming the minority. Are they going to treat us the way we treated them?
Right.
Mm-hmm. That's their concern. And of course, from the get-go, the Constitution wanted to make sure that the affluent maintain their affluency and the working class remain suppressed and exploited. Yes, that's how capitalism works.
Right. Okay. So the next question I have for you is, what do you fear most about the next Trump presidency?
Well, I think the biggest fear I have is that I used to think, well, president will get in, but we still maybe will have the House and he won't be able to maybe do what he wants to do. Unfortunately, they've got a trifecta, the House, the Senate, and the presidency, along with a right-wing Supreme Court. So he doesn't really have to be a dictator. And dictators usually will go after an opposition, which in this case we would say would be the left. But we don't have a left in this country anymore. So why does he have to be a dictator and alienate his voters and alienate others that went across the aisle? So he's got the power, he can do whatever he wants. And now you look at his cabinet members that he's been appointing, and a bunch of criminals. I mean, look at Gates, our attorney general, and the scandal that faces him. And it's unreal that the power that he has, and it worries me that he can also maybe purge the military to make sure that he has people in power that are going to follow his orders. And the other thing to me is the fact that law enforcement has supported Trump throughout his campaigns. And they did in 2016, 20, and again this year. So will he nationalize the police like Hitler did? I mean, that concerns me a lot. And because he wants to have everything under his own power and discretion to say, hey, guys, I want you to do this or whatever he wants to do. And that's very, very, very fearsome. Obviously, the mass deportations that is promised, well, that's happened before in history after World War I and again after World War II. The point is, in the deportation thing, is that out of the almost 2 million that were deported in the 50s, half were American citizens. So it's that they weren't distinguishing. The guy looks Mexican, put him in the bus and get him out of here.
Okay, so, and one of the things about this podcast is that we focus on progress, not perfection. The reason I do that is because I am not a history buff. I do not know all the things about history. I know some themes and I know what I learned at school and in college, a lot of American history and stuff, but there's nuance that people don't even understand. And I mean, thank you for bringing that to us. I know that there's been cycles of deportation over American history, especially Mexican individuals. And what I learned is that it's a flow. It's like it's almost they let people in to work on some big project and then vacate them. And it's like, it just feels very disconnected from the narrative, what's happening with Latino people and the United States of America. And I feel like people would benefit from that historical contact, which is almost a pipe dream at this point. You know what I mean?
Well, the thing about the deportation issue is that even the MAGA Republicans understand that without the Mexican, what are we going to eat? Because nobody wants to do the work in the agriculture industry. Well, also, 60% of the people in the kitchen of any kind of restaurant are Latino.
That's right.
And 60% of construction workers are Latino as well. So who's going to feed us and who's going to house us if we deport these guys? So eventually, pressure will come from Republicans on Trump. Hey, dude, what are you doing? You can't do that. What are we going to do without them? Who's going to do all that work?
Right. Yeah. So the next question I have for you is the opposite side of that same coin, which answered how you feel. What do you hope most about the next Trump president?
Well, the biggest thing that I hope is that somehow something would go in his mind that if there's enough pressure in the streets to stop the war in Gaza, to stop the killing of women and children. Gaza has been an open-air prison for the last, who knows, decades. And I think that also the other issue is dismantling the EPA with the climate crisis that we're facing. I mean, look at the devastation of climate crisis, getting more and more powerful. The other is, I hope it doesn't get us into war with Iran. I mean, we're in danger of a third world war right now. We're on that precipice. And unless people come out and protest foreign policy, it could happen. The war in Ukraine, well, that was a big mistake. And now they're going to abandon Ukraine. Mr. Biden did his last-ditch effort to help Zelensky because he knows that when Trump comes around, he may stop that aid to Ukraine.
You mentioned the impending World War III, and I'm of the thinking that we're already in it. It's just we're not fighting the same battles history has fought. Like, we're not necessarily deploying troops at the level. We're not mobilizing our forces at the level. But like, there's digital and cyber battlefronts happening all the time. I mean, there's several countries going at each other. We're receiving various supports of other countries, whether it's on the books or not. And so I think that part of the issue is that we as a society have become so numb and so detached from what is actually happening around us that we don't even see the forest for the trees, or we don't really see what's actually happening.
Well, we're in proxy wars, really, but we are at war. I mean, when we've been sending Israel $3 billion a year since 1999 so they could build up their military. We were getting ready for this. We were preparing Israel for this.